Closing shifts at Taco Bell were always rough, but that night was worse than usual. It was just me, my sister, and our manager, Melissa. 10 hours on our feet, orders nonstop, the fryer sputtering, the drive-through headset beeping in our ears like some endless alarm clock. By the time we locked the doors, the place was a mess. Grease clung to my skin, my back ached, and my stomach growled. None of us had eaten all shift. "Let's sit for a second," Melissa said, pulling her headset off and rubbing her temples. We grabbed a booth near the window, unwrapping our food like it was some hard-earned prize. The building was quiet now, just the hum of the soda machines and the occasional clatter of someone shifting in their seat. The parking lot outside was mostly empty, save for a few leftover cars from the bar down the street. I had just taken my first bite when the pounding started. It was so sudden, so forceful, that my first thought was someone had crashed into the glass. But no, just a man standing outside, his fists slamming against the locked doors. The guy looked off. Not just drunk, though that was my first guess. His clothes were wrinkled, like he'd been wearing them for days. His hair was a mess, sticking up in odd directions. His eyes were wide, too wide, like he hadn't blinked in a while. Melissa sighed, wiping her hands on a napkin as she stood up. "I'll handle it." She walked to the door, keeping it locked, and raised her voice through the glass. "Sorry, we're closed." The man shook his head, stepping closer. His breath fogged up the window. "Please, I need to eat. Just real quick." "We're closed," she repeated, firmer this time. He didn't move. A strange silence stretched between them, his face just inches from the glass, staring. Then he finally spoke, quieter this time. "Let me in." Melissa took a step back. "Sir, I can't do that. You need to leave." He didn't argue. He just stood there. His hands twitched at his sides. He glanced over his shoulder like he was checking for someone, then back at us. I shivered. Something about him made my skin crawl. "Come sit back down," my sister muttered. "He's just some drunk." Melissa hesitated, then nodded. We ignored him and went back to eating, trying to shake the unease. But I kept glancing at the glass doors. He was still there. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. He never left. He didn't knock again, didn't yell or cause a scene. He just stood outside, sometimes pacing near the doors, sometimes wandering out into the parking lot but always returning, like he was waiting for something. I checked the cameras. He never went to his car. He didn't seem to have one. He was just there. "Maybe we should call security," my sister whispered. Melissa shook her head. "For what? Loitering?" I didn't like it. The way he watched the building made me feel like we were trapped in a fishbowl with nowhere to go but out. At one point, he wandered toward the bridge down the street, the one that overlooked the canyon. My stomach twisted. I half hoped he would just keep walking. But no. A few minutes later, he was back, closer than before. I had a bad feeling. After a while, I stopped checking the cameras. We had cleaning to do, and I just wanted to go home. My sister and I scrubbed down the fryer. Melissa counted the registers. The routine helped me forget, until I went to take the trash out. The moment I stepped into the lobby, I glanced at the door. He was gone. Just like that. I froze, scanning the parking lot. Nothing. I looked at the street, the sidewalk, the bridge in the distance. No movement. I ran to the back. "Hey, that guy's gone." Melissa looked up from the register. "Finally." My sister frowned. "You sure?" I nodded. "Yeah, but I didn't see him leave." Melissa grabbed the keys. "Let's check outside before we walk to our cars, just in case." We climbed the metal stairs that led to the roof. From up there, we could see everything. The parking lot, the street, even past the bridge. Nothing. No sign of him. "Where the hell did he go?" my sister murmured. We finished closing in record time. No one wanted to linger. But the moment we stepped outside, I felt it again. That creeping sensation like we were being watched. We hurried to our cars, scanning the lot the whole way. My fingers clenched around my keys so tight my knuckles ached. My sister fumbled with her door. Melissa's hands were shaking. I kept waiting for something. A shadow, a noise, anything to tell me where that man had gone. But there was nothing. Just the dark, and the feeling that somewhere, somehow, he was still watching. That wasn't the only strange thing that happened at that Taco Bell. Years earlier, before my sister started working there, I had another unsettling night. It was late, just before closing, when a man came in. He looked excited, almost giddy, ordered food, chatted for a bit, said he was in town for something special. I handed him his bag, wished him a good night. He smiled. "Thanks. Gotta fuel up before the jump." I thought nothing of it at the time. The next day I found out. A base jumper had died overnight. His parachute failed. He landed wrong and was stuck in the canyon until morning. The news said he had come from out of state, that he was alone, that he had grabbed food before heading to the bridge. I was the last person to talk to him, to hand him his final meal. And even though I hadn't known, even though there was nothing I could have done, I still wonder if I had said something different, if I had known what was about to happen. Would it have changed anything? Or was he always meant to disappear into the dark? I don't know why I still think about that night. Maybe it's because things could have gone way worse. Maybe it's because we walked straight into something we had no business getting involved in. Or maybe it's because even now, I have no idea if we saved someone's life or barely escaped with our own. But I do know one thing. If Anna and I had ignored our instincts, we might not be here to tell the story. It was late, way too late to still be driving. Anna and I had been on the road for hours, our road trip turning into an endurance test against exhaustion. We had left Atlanta that afternoon heading toward New Orleans, but somewhere along the way we'd taken a detour to avoid traffic, and now we were in the middle of nowhere. The road stretched out in front of us like an endless ribbon of asphalt, cutting through empty fields on either side. No streetlights, no signs of civilization, just the hum of the engine and the occasional flicker of Anna's phone screen as she tried, unsuccessfully, to load the map. "Still nothing?" I asked, gripping the wheel. "Nothing." She sighed, tapping at her screen. "No service out here. I told you we should have stayed on the main highway." I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face. "Yeah, well, that main highway had traffic backed up for miles. This was supposed to be faster. It's not faster if we're lost." She wasn't wrong. My stomach growled loudly and I sighed again. "Look, we just need to find food and a place to stretch our legs. Then we can figure out where the hell we are." As if on cue, a green freeway sign appeared in the distance, its reflective letters glowing in our headlights. Exit 104, food, gas. My shoulders relaxed. There we go. Anna leaned forward, reading the small list of businesses. Gas station, Taco Bell, and some local diner. "Fast food sounds good," I said, flipping on my blinker. Anna yawned. "As long as it's actually open. It's almost midnight." We took the exit, following the road into what could barely be called a town. It was small, so small that calling it quiet didn't do it justice. It was dead. Most of the buildings were dark, their neon signs turned off. The diner was closed, the windows black. The gas station on the corner was the only thing still lit up, but the parking lot was empty except for one beat-up truck by the pumps. Taco Bell, though. Its sign was glowing. Open 24 hours was proudly displayed under the logo. The drive-through menu was lit up, and the fluorescent lights inside flickered slightly, but they were on. Anna glanced at me. "You sure about this? We're already here." I pulled into the lot. It was empty. No other cars, no customers. "Guess no one else is craving tacos at midnight," Anna muttered. I pulled up to the drive-through speaker, rolling down my window. Static crackled from the speaker before a deep male voice came through. "Welcome to Taco Bell. Can I take your order?" I opened my mouth to respond, then stopped. Somewhere in the background, beneath the static and the hum of the speaker, I heard something else. A scream. Muffled, distant, but unmistakably human. Anna heard it too. I saw the way she stiffened in her seat, her eyes snapping to mine. The scream cut off abruptly, then silence. I hesitated. Did you hear that?" The speaker buzzed with more static before the man's voice returned flat and monotone. "We're closed." I frowned. Your sign says 24 hours. More silence. Then after a beat, "The sign's wrong. We're closed." Something was off. The man's voice wasn't just uninterested, it felt forced, like he was reciting a line. I glanced at Anna. She was gripping her phone now, her body tense. "Let's go," she whispered. But I didn't move. That scream was still echoing in my ears. Instead of driving off, I pulled around to the front of the building. The lobby was dark, but there were shapes moving inside, shadows shifting near the back. "I don't like this," Anna muttered. I unbuckled my seatbelt. "I just want to check." "Are you insane?" she hissed. "You heard that scream. Let's go." I hesitated. Every logical part of me said she was right, but my gut was screaming something different. I opened the car door. As soon as I stepped outside, the night air hit me, cold and thick, carrying the scent of fryer oil and something else I couldn't quite place. The Taco Bell felt wrong. I walked toward the glass doors, my heart pounding. The moment I got close, I saw him. A man stepped into view from the back of the restaurant. He wasn't wearing a Taco Bell uniform. He was in a dark hoodie, his sleeves pushed up to reveal tattooed forearms. His posture was stiff, unnatural. He didn't look like an employee. I knocked lightly. "Hey man, you guys open?" The man stared at me for a second too long before finally shaking his head. "No." I pointed to the hours sign. "It says..." "The sign's wrong." I studied his face. His expression was unreadable, but something about it felt off. And then behind him I saw it. A figure. Someone in the back, half hidden behind the soda machine. Their eyes were wide, terrified. They mouthed something to me. "Help me." A wave of cold washed over me. The man at the door followed my gaze. Then slowly, he stepped forward, blocking my view. His mouth curled into a small, forced smile. "You should go." I didn't move. Then, another scream from inside. This one was louder, desperate. Anna heard it. She threw the passenger door open. "James, get in the car!" The man at the door's expression changed. His face twisted into something almost angry. "Leave," he ordered. His voice had dropped, deeper, more threatening. My heart hammered. "Run." I took a slow step back, then another. The man didn't move. He just watched me. I turned, sprinted to the car. Anna had already climbed into the driver's seat. The second I slammed the door, she floored it. We didn't stop. Not until we were a mile down the road, back on the freeway. Anna's hands were shaking on the wheel. "James? What the hell was that?" I was still breathing hard. My hands clenched into fists. "I don't know." She swallowed. "We have to call the cops." I nodded. I didn't care if it was nothing. I wasn't taking the chance. We pulled over and dialed 911. 20 minutes later, we saw the flashing lights of a police car speeding toward the Taco Bell. We waited, watched, and then they brought him out. The man in the hoodie, in handcuffs. An officer approached our car. "You the ones who called?" We nodded. The officer let out a breath. "You did good. Turns out this guy tried to rob the place. Knocked out one of the employees and was holding the other in the back." I felt sick. If we hadn't stopped, if we hadn't called. The officer shook his head. "You probably saved a life tonight." Anna and I drove away in silence. Neither of us could eat. And to this day, I still wonder, what if we hadn't listened to our instincts? At 18, I was ready to leave home. The tension in my parents' house had grown unbearable, and I knew I needed space, distance, anything to get away from the looming pressure. I packed up and moved to Texas, settling about 10 hours away from everything I knew. It wasn't a place I was familiar with, but I wasn't there to feel comfortable. I was there to start fresh. Texas was overwhelming at first, especially with the bustling energy of a city like Dallas. Everything felt loud, fast, and unfamiliar. But soon enough, the social media world opened up to me. I began adding people on Facebook, people who lived in the surrounding area, people with interests that matched mine. A few weeks later, I found myself connecting with Rachel, a girl who quickly became my closest friend. We were both young, both looking for an escape from our lives, and, admittedly, both a little reckless. We spent our days hanging out, smoking, drinking, and losing ourselves in music. I had a boyfriend at the time, someone who seemed perfect at first, but I quickly realized he was controlling. He didn't like the people I hung out with. He didn't like me going anywhere when he wasn't around. Looking back, it was obvious I ignored the red flags. I just didn't want to see them. Rachel worked at Taco Haven, a small, sleepy fast food place that stayed open late. I'd wait for her shift to end, usually after 2 a.m. The place was practically deserted by then, except for the occasional late-night drive-through customer. I'd hang around, drink refills, and mess around on my phone until she was off work. One night, around midnight, a man walked in. He was about 6 feet 4 inches, wearing a long, worn-out green coat. His thick, scraggly gray beard nearly touched his chest. He walked over to a table across from me and sat down. I could feel my stomach tighten. Something about him didn't sit right, but I tried to brush it off. I sent Rachel a message, half joking, half worried. "This guy is giving me the creeps." Rachel quickly replied, "Oh my God, yeah. He is." She sent me an emoji with wide eyes. I kept my head down, staring at my phone. Rachel, standing behind the counter, watched the man for a moment before walking over. She was small, only about 5 feet 1 inch, and this guy towered over her as she approached. "Excuse me, sir," she said, trying to sound polite but firm. "You can't stay here unless you're ordering something." The man didn't respond. He just got up slowly, shuffling toward the counter. Rachel quickly handed him a drink cup and he slapped some crumpled money down on the counter. After grabbing the cup, he sat back down in the same spot. Rachel looked over at me with a confused, uneasy expression, but didn't say anything. She started to clean up behind the counter as the man sipped his drink, but I couldn't stop glancing at him. He was staring at me. I could feel his eyes boring into me like lasers. By 1:30 a.m., Rachel had finished cleaning and was standing by the counter, her phone in hand. I felt a little safer, thinking the man would leave soon, but instead I watched him stand up and move closer. It was getting creepy now. "Hey, you ready?" I asked Rachel, already standing up to throw my drink away. "Yeah, let's go," she replied, walking toward the front door. As we were about to step outside, I heard the unmistakable sound of a chair scraping across the floor. I glanced back and saw the man following us. My heart dropped. "Run," I whispered urgently to Rachel. "Now." We quickly dashed around the back of the building, trying to head toward her apartment. But as we turned a corner, my phone buzzed. At first I thought it was just a random message, but then my heart skipped a beat as I saw who it was from. A new message. From a profile I didn't recognize. James Jameson. No profile picture. The name itself felt fake. I opened the message and my stomach lurched. The first line sent a chill down my spine. "Don't run from me. Wheels are faster than you can run." I felt a cold wave of terror as I read the next part. "I know where you and Rachel live." Attached to the message were multiple photos. Photos of Rachel and me at different places, separate occasions. There was one of me walking my dog in the park, another of me getting coffee at a local cafe. A picture of Rachel and me in the mall, browsing the shelves. Each photo was creepy, uncomfortably intimate. And then came the worst part. The message that made my heart stop. I know your full name, your address, your university, everything. I shoved my phone into my pocket, trembling. I looked at Rachel, and I could see the same panic in her eyes. The headlights behind us flickered on. I turned around just as a white van crept closer. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Rachel's arm and pulling her forward. "It's him! It's him!" We sprinted harder, our legs burning with every step. Rachel's apartment was only a block away, but with the van following us, I didn't feel like we'd make it. The van's headlights grew brighter and I heard the engine rev as it got closer. We reached the stairs to Rachel's apartment, but she tripped on the step. I didn't stop. I helped her up quickly and we fumbled for the keys. My hands shook as I searched my bag. "Where are they?" Rachel hissed, panic rising in her voice. "Where are the keys?" Finally, my fingers brushed against them, and I shoved the key into the lock. Just as the door opened, I heard the screech of the van's brakes. The man was here. "Go!" I yelled, shoving Rachel inside the door. We barely managed to get the door shut before his foot wedged in, trying to stop us from locking him out. But with a hard shove, we got the door closed just in time. Outside, the man let out a deep, wheezing laugh. It was the kind of laugh you hear from someone who knows they've got you cornered. It chilled me to the core. Rachel grabbed her phone, calling 911. Her voice was shaky as she explained the situation, but we could hear him outside, breathing heavily, laughing like a maniac. I could hear footsteps on the other side of the house, and Rachel and I exchanged terrified glances. "Shh," I whispered. "We need to hide." We rushed to the closet in the back hall, squeezing inside. It was cramped, but we barely fit, huddling together as the man's footsteps grew louder. "Come out. Come out," he muttered under his breath. I love it when they play hard to get. Rachel was shaking violently. I tried to keep quiet, but every inch of me screamed in terror. Suddenly, we heard a loud crash, a vase or something being thrown, and I couldn't stop the scream that escaped my mouth. The footsteps grew closer, but at the same time I heard sirens in the distance. They were getting closer too. When the door to the closet finally opened, I was ready to collapse. But instead, I was met with bright lights and the voices of police officers. They had found us. The man was arrested, and we later learned the full extent of his plan. In his van, they found rope, duct tape, knives, and a vial of roofies. We were lucky. So damn lucky. If the police hadn't arrived when they did, I don't even want to think about what could have happened to us. I never used to believe in ghost stories. If you asked me back then, I would have laughed and told you that the scariest thing at Taco Bell was dealing with drunk customers at 2 a.m. But after what I saw in my last summer working there, I don't laugh about that kind of stuff anymore. I was 20 at the time, working the closing shift at a Taco Bell just outside of Houston. It wasn't my dream job or anything, but it paid the bills while I took night classes at the community college. The place was open till 3 a.m., and those late-night shifts were always weird. You'd get the usual mix, stoners with the munchies, exhausted truckers, and the occasional Karen demanding fresh chalupas like her life depended on it. But nothing, and I mean nothing, was as strange as what happened one Thursday night. That night it was just me and my coworker, Marcus. The dinner rush had died down, and by 2:50 a.m. we were basically just waiting for the clock to hit closing time. The restaurant was empty, the kitchen was mostly cleaned, and I was already picturing myself driving home with the windows down, music blasting. Then, right at 2:55 a.m., 5 minutes before closing, the drive-through headset beeped. I groaned. "You've got to be kidding me." Marcus laughed, leaning against the counter. "Watch. It's probably some drunk dude ordering 100 tacos." I sighed, adjusting my headset. "Welcome to Taco Bell, what can I get for you?" Silence. I glanced at the monitor that showed the drive-through lane. A car was sitting at the order box, just barely visible under the dim yellow lights. But something felt off. The driver's side window was still up. Usually people roll it down before we even finish greeting them, but this car just sat there, engine humming softly. I tried again. "Whenever you're ready, go ahead and order." More silence. I looked at Marcus. "Yo, check the screen. This dude isn't saying anything." Marcus came over, squinting at the monitor. Maybe they fell asleep? It wasn't impossible. We'd had drunk customers pass out in the drive-thru before. But something about this was different. The car wasn't swerving. No voices were coming from inside. Just a dead, eerie silence. And then, just as I was about to say something, the driver's window rolled down. My stomach dropped. The driver's seat was empty. I blinked, trying to process what I was looking at. "Yo, do you see that?" I asked Marcus. He leaned in closer. "Where the hell is the driver?" The car was just sitting there, motionless, but there was no one inside. No shadow of a person, no movement, nothing. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Maybe the driver was slumped down out of sight. I spoke into the headset again. If you're ready to order, go ahead." Silence. Then the car started rolling forward. My breath hitched. There was no one behind the wheel, no one pressing the gas. And yet, the car crept toward the payment window like it was following some invisible force. Marcus took off his headset. "Nah, man. This has to be a prank." I wanted to believe him, but my gut was screaming at me that something was wrong. We both watched as the car smoothly pulled up to the window where people usually pay. And then, 3. Loud. Knocks. The sound echoed through the quiet restaurant, making my skin crawl. Marcus and I locked eyes. Neither of us had moved. No one else was in the store. So who the hell just knocked? I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the drive-thru window latch. Every instinct in my body told me not to open it. But against my better judgment, I did. I peeked out, my heart hammering. The car was right there, engine still running, empty. No driver, no passenger, no movement. And then, in the reflection of the drive-thru glass, I saw a face. Pale, sunken eyes, a twisted grin. Someone, or something, was sitting in the back seat watching me. I gasped and jerked back, nearly knocking over the register. My hands were shaking. "Marcus," I whispered, my voice barely working. There's someone in the back seat." He frowned. "What?" I turned to the screen, pointing. "Look, right there." But when I glanced back at the monitor, the back seat was empty. The car slowly started rolling forward again, drifting away from the window and toward the exit. I slammed the window shut, breathing hard. Marcus looked just as freaked out as I felt. "Dude, we're closing. Now." I nodded. We killed the lights, locked the doors, and finished cleaning in record time. But the whole time I couldn't stop thinking about that face, that grin, and the way it had disappeared. The next evening, I wasn't scheduled to work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to go back. I told myself I was being stupid, that it was probably some elaborate prank. But at exactly 2:55 a.m., I parked across the street from the Taco Bell and waited. At first, nothing happened. The drive-thru lane was empty. The store was closing up like normal. And then, a car pulled in. I leaned forward, my stomach twisting. It was the same car, same make, same color, same eerie stillness. The window didn't roll down. The order box remained silent. But this time, I wasn't wearing a headset. I wasn't behind the glass. I was outside sitting in my car watching from a distance. And that's when I saw it. The shadow in the back seat. I barely had time to react before the car pulled away, vanishing into the night. I never told anyone what I saw. Marcus quit a few weeks later. He said he was moving out of state, but I always wondered if he just didn't want to be near that place anymore. Me? I left Taco Bell not long after, found another job, and tried to forget. But every now and then, when I'm out driving late at night, I'll see a car sitting at an empty drive-thru, No driver, no passengers, just waiting. And I always wonder, is it the same one? I was 12 the last time I stepped foot inside a Taco Bell. I'm 18 now and I still refuse to go back. It wasn't because of bad food or a rude employee. It wasn't even because of the atmosphere. It was because of something else. Something I still don't fully understand. That night, my stepdad, Mike, and I were on our way home from visiting family in another town. It was late, maybe around 9. The highway stretched out before us in a never-ending ribbon of asphalt, the yellow lines blurring as I stared out the window. The radio played softly, some old rock song Mike liked. He tapped his fingers on the wheel, humming along. "You hungry?" he asked, glancing at me. I shrugged. A little. "How about Taco Bell?" I hesitated. It wasn't that I hated Taco Bell. I just always felt weird in fast food places, like something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. My mom and grandma always talked about having a sixth sense for strange things like ghosts or bad energy. They said it ran in the family. I wasn't sure if I believed in all that, but I did know that sometimes places gave me a strange feeling. Still, I was hungry. "Yeah, sure," I said. Mike took the next exit, and a few minutes later we pulled into the parking lot of a small Taco Bell. The place was packed. The line stretched from the counter to the door, and people stood around waiting for their orders. The smell of seasoned beef and melted cheese filled the air. "Go find a seat," Mike said. "I'll order." I nodded and weaved through the crowd, scanning for an open table. There weren't many options. Most tables were taken, but near the window I spotted an empty one. I sat down, pulled out my phone, and scrolled through social media. I wasn't really reading anything, just passing time. Then I looked up. A boy was sitting across from me. I hadn't seen him sit down. He was just there. He looked my age, maybe a little younger. He had dark hair, pale skin, and wore a hoodie that looked a little worn. His clothes seemed a bit outdated, but not in a way that immediately raised alarms. He smiled. "Hey." I blinked. Hey. I glanced around expecting to see his family, but no one was paying attention to him. He wasn't looking toward the counter like he was waiting for food. He was just sitting there looking at me like we'd known each other for years. "You waiting for your family?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "Just passing through." I nodded, though something about the way he said it made me pause. His voice was calm, casual, but there was something off. I just couldn't figure out what. We started talking, just small talk. What schools we went to, favorite movies, stuff like that. But as we talked, I started noticing something strange. People kept looking at us, not just glancing, but staring. Some with confusion. Others with almost concern. I ignored it, chalking it up to small-town nosiness. After a few minutes, Mike appeared by the door, holding a bag of food. "Come on, let's go." I stood up and turned to the boy. "Nice talking to you." He smiled. "Yeah, see you around." I walked toward the door, but something made me turn back one last time. The boy was gone. I climbed into Mike's truck, shaking off the weird feeling. Maybe he had just left quickly. Maybe I was overthinking things. We pulled out of the parking lot, and as we passed the building, I glanced back at the window. The boy was standing inside, watching me. His hand lifted in a small wave. A chill ran down my spine. I hesitated, but I waved back. Then, as we passed the next window, he was gone again. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around my phone. Something wasn't right. A few minutes later, as we drove past the side of the building, I saw something that made my heart nearly stop. There was a small memorial near the curb. Flowers, candles, a framed photo, and a face I recognized. My stomach twisted. "Mike, stop the truck." "What?" "Pull over." Mike pulled onto the shoulder, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. Before he could ask what was wrong, I was already unlocking my phone, my hands shaking as I opened the browser. I typed in the Taco Bell's location. Then, Accident. A news article popped up. I clicked it. 3 years ago, a boy was left inside the Taco Bell while his parents ran an errand. He got bored waiting and stepped outside. A car was speeding through the parking lot. The driver didn't see him in time. I stared at the screen, my breath coming in short gasps. There was a photo at the bottom of the article. His photo. I dropped my phone onto my lap, my vision swimming. Mike frowned. "What's wrong?" I shook my head, unable to speak. The same boy who had sat across from me, the same boy who had smiled, the same boy who had waved from the window, and the same boy whose memorial stood outside the Taco Bell. We drove home in silence. Mike didn't ask any more questions, but I could tell he was watching me, worried. I spent the rest of the night in bed, staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying everything in my head. The way he just appeared, the way people stared at us, the way he said, "I used to come here a lot." I don't know why he talked to me. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe he just wanted to feel normal again, even for a few minutes. Or maybe he was waiting for someone to notice him. There's something unsettling about being forgotten. I thought about how that boy must have felt, sitting there waiting for his parents, not knowing he would never leave. How many people had walked past him, not realizing he was still there. Maybe that's why he spoke to me. Maybe, just for a little while, he wanted someone to see him again. I never went back to that Taco Bell, and I never will. I never used to think twice about late-night fast food runs. I mean, what's there to be scared of? A drive-through, some tired employees, a bag of greasy food. It's all routine. But after what happened 2 months ago, I don't think I'll ever pull into a Taco Bell at night without a second thought. It was a Tuesday, I remember that much. Tuesdays were my longest days. Between classes and my part-time job at the gas station, I barely had time to breathe. By the time I clocked out, it was already 11:30 p.m., and I was starving. Taco Bell had always been my go-to. It was 10 minutes from work, and the drive-thru was usually open till midnight. Even on nights when they were short-staffed, they stayed open as long as they could. That night, though, something felt off the second I pulled in. The parking lot was empty, no cars in the drive-thru, no lights inside. I slowed down, staring at the darkened windows. Normally, even if the lobby was closed, the drive-thru had some lights on. But tonight, the place looked dead. I hesitated for a second. Maybe they closed early again. But as I rolled up to the drive-thru speaker, I figured it was worth a shot. "Hello?" I called out after a few seconds of silence. "You guys still open?" No response. I exhaled, already preparing to leave. Just as I started rolling up my window, the speaker crackled. A voice, low, muffled, came through. It was impossible to make out the words. It was like someone was speaking with their mouth right against the mic, too close for it to pick up anything clearly. I frowned. What was that?" Silence. I waited a few seconds before shaking my head. Probably just a glitch or some kid messing around. Not worth sitting there all night. I put my car in drive and rolled forward, passing the first window where you normally pay. It was completely dark. No employees, no sign of movement. I kept going, approaching the second window, just to confirm the place was empty. That's when I saw him. A figure stood inside, right at the window. For a split second, I thought maybe it was an employee, someone finishing up late. But as I got closer, my stomach twisted. The person wasn't wearing a uniform. They were wearing a clown mask. It covered their entire face, white, with exaggerated red lips and hollow black eyes. And the second my headlights hit the window, they ducked out of sight. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I slammed my foot on the gas and peeled out of the parking lot so fast my tires screeched. My heart was hammering in my chest as I pulled into a gas station a few blocks away. I parked under the bright lights, gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Who the hell was that? If the store was closed, why was someone inside? And more importantly, why were they hiding? I debated calling the police, but stopped myself. What would I even say? Hey, there's a guy in a mask inside a Taco Bell. It wasn't illegal to wear a mask, and for all I knew, it could have been some employee messing around after hours. Still, the image stuck with me, the way they ducked so fast like they didn't want to be seen. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just some stupid prank. Maybe it wasn't even worth worrying about. But the next night I found out just how wrong I was. I got off work an hour earlier that night. Same routine, long shift, starving, craving Taco Bell. And despite what had happened, I couldn't shake the habit. So I went back. This time, the place looked normal. A few cars in the drive-thru, lights on inside, like nothing had ever happened. I pulled in, placed my order, and drove up to the window. A girl in a Taco Bell visor slid it open. As she handed me my drink, I hesitated. Hey, weird question, I said. Were you guys open last night? She gave me a confused look. No, we closed early, like around 9. Why? I swallowed. No reason. Just thought I saw something here late last night. She tilted her head. What do you mean? I debated whether to say anything. Then, against my better judgment, I told her. I told her about pulling in late, the dark building, the voice on the speaker, and finally, about the man in the clown mask. The second I mentioned the mask, her expression changed. She stiffened, her face paling slightly. Wait, she said. A clown mask? Yeah, I said slowly. You've seen him? She didn't answer at first. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder like she was checking if anyone else was listening. Then she leaned in slightly. You're not the first person to say that, she whispered. A chill crawled down my spine. What do you mean? A couple months ago, another guy came through late at night. Same thing. Dark building, voice on the speaker, someone in the window wearing a mask. He freaked out and called the cops. My skin prickled. And she lowered her voice. They checked the cameras, but there was nothing there. I stared at her. What do you mean, nothing? She shrugged. The footage showed an empty store. No one inside. No one at the window. Just his car sitting there. A heavy silence stretched between us. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Look, I don't know if it's a joke or some homeless guy breaking in or what, she said. But the managers don't talk about it, and nobody stays here past closing anymore. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I grabbed my food, muttered a thanks, and drove off. That was 2 months ago. I haven't been back since. But sometimes, late at night, I think about it. I think about that voice on the speaker, the man in the window, and worst of all, I think about what the cameras showed, or rather, what they didn't. I never used to think twice about late-night fast food runs. I mean, what's there to be scared of? A drive-through, some tired employees, a bag of greasy food. It's all routine. But after what happened 2 months ago, I don't think I'll ever pull into a Taco Bell at night without a second thought. It was a Tuesday, I remember that much. Tuesdays were my longest days. Between classes and my part-time job at the gas station, I barely had time to breathe. By the time I clocked out, it was already 11:30 p.m., and I was starving. Taco Bell had always been my go-to. It was 10 minutes from work, and the drive-thru was usually open till midnight. Even on nights when they were short-staffed, they stayed open as long as they could. That night, though, something felt off the second I pulled in. The parking lot was empty, no cars in the drive-thru, no lights inside. I slowed down, staring at the darkened windows. Normally, even if the lobby was closed, the drive-thru had some lights on. But tonight, the place looked dead. I hesitated for a second. Maybe they closed early again. But as I rolled up to the drive-thru speaker, I figured it was worth a shot. "Hello?" I called out after a few seconds of silence. "You guys still open?" No response. I exhaled, already preparing to leave. Just as I started rolling up my window, The speaker crackled. A voice, low, muffled, came through. It was impossible to make out the words. It was like someone was speaking with their mouth right against the mic, too close for it to pick up anything clearly. I frowned. What was that? Silence. I waited a few seconds before shaking my head. Probably just a glitch or some kid messing around. Not worth sitting there all night. I put my car in drive and rolled forward, passing the first window where you normally pay. It was completely dark. No employees, no sign of movement. I kept going, approaching the second window, just to confirm the place was empty. That's when I saw him. A figure stood inside, right at the window. For a split second, I thought maybe it was an employee, someone finishing up late. But as I got closer, my stomach twisted. The person wasn't wearing a uniform. They were wearing a clown mask. It covered their entire face, white, with exaggerated red lips and hollow black eyes. And the second my headlights hit the window, they ducked out of sight. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I slammed my foot on the gas and peeled out of the parking lot so fast my tires screeched. My heart was hammering in my chest as I pulled into a gas station a few blocks away. I parked under the bright lights, gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Who the hell was that? If the store was closed, why was someone inside? And more importantly, why were they hiding? I debated calling the police, but stopped myself. What would I even say? Hey, there's a guy in a mask inside a Taco Bell. It wasn't illegal to wear a mask, and for all I knew, it could have been some employee messing around after hours. Still, the image stuck with me, the way they ducked so fast like they didn't want to be seen. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just some stupid prank. Maybe it wasn't even worth worrying about. But the next night I found out just how wrong I was. I got off work an hour earlier that night. Same routine, long shift, starving, craving Taco Bell. And despite what had happened, I couldn't shake the habit. So I went back. This time, the place looked normal. A few cars in the drive-thru, lights on inside, like nothing had ever happened. I pulled in, placed my order, and drove up to the window. A girl in a Taco Bell visor slid it open. As she handed me my drink, I hesitated. "Hey, weird question," I said. "Were you guys open last night?" She gave me a confused look. "No, we closed early, like around 9. Why?" I swallowed. No reason. Just thought I saw something here late last night." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" I debated whether to say anything. Then, against my better judgment, I told her. I told her about pulling in late, the dark building, the voice on the speaker, and finally, about the man in the clown mask. The second I mentioned the mask, her expression changed. She stiffened, her face paling slightly. "Wait," she said. "A clown mask?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "You've seen him?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder like she was checking if anyone else was listening. Then she leaned in slightly. "You're not the first person to say that," she whispered. A chill crawled down my spine. "What do you mean?" "A couple months ago, another guy came through late at night. Same thing. Dark building, voice on the speaker, someone in the window wearing a mask. He freaked out and called the cops." My skin prickled. "And?" She lowered her voice. "They checked the cameras, but there was nothing there." Something inside me snapped. It was like a switch flipped, and suddenly all the training, all the fight kicked in. I bit down on his arm. Hard. I tasted blood as I clamped my teeth down, feeling his body jerk with pain. The man let out a strangled yell, but he didn't immediately let go. I bit harder, desperation flooding me until finally he released me, staggering back with a howl of pain. But he didn't leave. Instead, he backed off slowly, giving us all a crazed look before turning and running into the night. The police arrived shortly after, following the blood trail he had left behind. But by the time they got there, he was long gone. They took our statements, but there was nothing else they could do. I quit the next day. That night changed me. I had nightmares for weeks, waking up in cold sweats, my heart racing. The trauma lingered, and the relationship I had with my boyfriend at the time fell apart. He couldn't understand why I was so distant, why I was so shaken. I went to therapy, but the damage was done. The next day, I handed in my resignation. I didn't give a reason. I didn't need to. The whole place had changed for me overnight. The normal hustle of orders, the occasional jokes with friends who'd come through the drive-thru, all felt hollow. Nothing seemed the same after that man had tried to hurt me. The morning after I quit, the police called. They had tracked down some of the man's DNA from the blood trail he'd left, but there was nothing in their system. No criminal record. Nothing. I wanted to ask them how that was even possible. How could someone just vanish like that? But I didn't. I just hung up the phone, feeling more hollow than before. It was as if he'd never even existed. I went to therapy for a while. At first I resisted. I didn't want to sit there and talk about feelings. I had spent my whole life putting up walls, practicing martial arts, being tough so no one could hurt me. But it turned out that no amount of training could prepare me for what had happened. I spent the first few weeks in therapy just staring at the floor, unable to find words. But eventually, I started talking. Slowly. I told her about the man, about how I had felt like I couldn't breathe, like I was frozen in time, how I hadn't been able to defend myself like I thought I would, how I had freaked out, bit down on him in desperation, and how it hadn't been enough to stop him. But therapy didn't stop the nightmares. They came every night, dragging me back to that moment when I was staring into his empty eyes, hearing his disgusting voice, feeling his grip tightening around my neck. No matter how many times I woke up drenched in sweat, I couldn't escape the fear. My boyfriend and I tried to make things work after that. I wanted to move past it, to go back to how things were, but I couldn't. The trauma had crept into everything. I was jumpy, on edge all the time, and nothing felt normal anymore. He didn't understand. I wanted to lean on him, but instead I felt like I was pushing him away. We broke up a few weeks later. It wasn't his fault. It just wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. Months passed. I graduated high school, but nothing felt right. I went to college, trying to put some distance between myself and the dark memories, but they followed me, lurking in every shadow. I found myself throwing myself into my studies, not because I loved them, but because they were a distraction. Mortuary science seemed like a good fit. Maybe it was the idea of helping people with their final moments, the idea of taking control over something that had once felt so uncontrollable. It wasn't until a year later that I ran into someone from Del Taco again. I was walking across campus when I saw her, Samantha, one of the cooks who had been there that night. She was sitting outside a cafe, reading a textbook, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Hey, long time no see," she called, waving me over. I hesitated for a moment. Seeing her was a reminder of the person I used to be, before everything changed. But I made my way over and sat down across from her. "How have you been?" she asked gently. I wasn't sure how to answer. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, the nightmares, the therapy, how it felt like I was living in a fog. But the other part of me just wanted to pretend everything was fine, that I was past it. "I'm doing okay," I said. "It's been tough, but I'm getting there." She nodded, understanding more than I expected. "You know, I've been thinking about that night, about what happened." She hesitated before speaking again. "Do you ever think about going back?" I shook my head. The thought of returning to Del Taco made my stomach twist. The memory of that man, his voice, his eyes, was still too fresh. "I don't think I could," I replied softly. "Not after what happened." She paused, looking at me with concern. "I understand, but, you know, I think you did the right thing. I don't know if I could have handled it the way you did. That was the thing about trauma, it changed you. And no matter how much time passed, the scars stayed. But what mattered now was how I moved forward. 2 years later, I was married. Not to my high school boyfriend, but to Alex, one of the cooks from that night at Del Taco. He hadn't been there when everything went down, but he had come in to cover for me when I had to leave early. After everything, we kept in touch. We supported each other through the mess of our shared experience. When we got married, it felt like I was finally reclaiming some piece of myself that had been lost. And as strange as it seemed, we both agreed that our kids would never set foot in a fast food restaurant like that. We would do everything in our power to shield them from the dark corners of the world we had witnessed. I wasn't sure if I would ever be completely free of the shadows of that night. But I had learned something important along the way. Survival wasn't just about fighting. It was about moving forward, no matter how hard it seemed. And so, as the years went by, I focused on building a future. One where I was no longer the scared girl behind the drive-through window. One where I had taken control, not just over the things I could see, but the things I couldn't. And as for that man, the one who had tried to hurt me, I never found out what happened to him. I don't know if he was ever caught, if he'd ever hurt anyone else. But I wasn't going to waste any more of my life on him. Some things, you just have to let go. It was one of those evenings where everything felt off, though I couldn't quite place why. I had just finished my workout, the kind of session that left my muscles aching but somehow still buzzing with energy. Tom was with me. His parents hadn't been able to pick him up, so we decided to grab some dinner together. Taco Bell seemed like the easy choice, something quick to soothe our growing hunger. We pulled into the parking lot around 6:30 p.m. The bell over the door jingled as we walked in, the familiar smell of spices and fried food hitting me immediately. But as we stepped inside, the air felt heavier than usual, as if something in the atmosphere was just off. I couldn't shake the unease, even as I waved it off as nothing more than my tiredness from the workout. I looked over at Tom, who was already eyeing the menu. "You good?" he asked, glancing back at me. I was clutching my stomach now, a sudden wave of nausea hitting me hard. "Yeah, just give me a minute," I mumbled, a cold sweat starting to bead on my forehead. Tom went up to order while I made my way to the bathroom. The nausea turned into a full-blown dizziness as I pushed open the bathroom door, desperate to get relief. I barely made it to the toilet before my body rejected everything I had eaten earlier. I threw up with a violent force, my vision spinning and my mind fogging up. As I rested my head against the cool tiled wall, I glanced down at my watch. It read 6:34. My breathing slowed as I started to feel better, the initial wave of dizziness subsiding. But before I could even stand up to wash my hands, I heard frantic knocking on the door. The sharp raps echoed through the small, otherwise empty room. "Hey, you okay in there?" Tom's voice sounded muffled but full of worry. "You've been in there for hours." Confused, I blinked, still sitting on the floor. Hours? I felt like I had been in here for just a few minutes, maybe less. I looked at my watch again, still showing 6:34. "I'm fine," I called back, forcing myself to stand. "I was just sick. I'll be out in a second." But when I finally opened the door, I was met with more than just Tom. The employees were gathered outside too, their faces a mixture of concern and confusion. "You've been in there for 4 hours, one of the workers said, her voice shaking. We thought something had happened." I shook my head, trying to process what she was saying. "No way. I was just in there for a few minutes, I swear." Tom's face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You were so quiet, man. Too quiet. We were about to come in after you." My stomach churned again, not from sickness, but from confusion. I looked at the food on the counter, the tacos we had ordered, now cold and unappetizing. The Baja Blast slushes were no longer slushes but flat soda, the ice having long melted. It didn't make sense. We'd only been here for maybe 10 minutes, but everything felt so wrong now. We hurried out of the Taco Bell, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following us, watching us. The night air outside felt colder than usual, the world somehow quieter. Tom didn't say much as I dropped him off at his place, but I could tell he was just as shaken as I was. The drive back home was the worst part. The feeling of sickness that had been triggered by the food earlier returned, but this time, it wasn't just physical. It was like something in me had shifted, like I wasn't quite myself anymore. As I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that I had lost more than just time tonight. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't even look back at the Taco Bell without feeling a wave of dread rush over me. Something had happened there, something that I couldn't remember, but I could feel in my bones. A sensation I couldn't name, but one I knew I never wanted to experience again. That night I lay in bed, the world spinning around me. I tried to sleep it off, but every time I closed my eyes, the image of that bathroom door, locked, silent, and yet so full of something else, kept haunting me. The eerie silence when I was in there. The knocking, frantic and desperate, yet so distant. The worst part? I couldn't remember what happened in those hours I supposedly lost. I didn't faint. I didn't pass out. I didn't wake up on the floor. I simply went in, threw up, and walked out. And yet, I knew something was different. The weeks that followed were filled with unease. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself that maybe it had all been a weird combination of exhaustion, stress, and a bad reaction to my workout. But every time I thought about it, the same chilling sense of dread crept back into my mind. I couldn't even drive past the Taco Bell without my stomach tightening, a heaviness weighing on my chest. My friends noticed that I was more distant, more withdrawn. Even Tom was acting strangely. He started avoiding me when I tried to bring up what happened. One night, he finally admitted something that made my skin crawl. "I've been dreaming about that place," he said, his voice low. "Every night I keep seeing the bathroom, but it's different. It's like there's something in there with you, something that isn't human." His words sent a shock through me. Was it possible that whatever had happened that night wasn't just some freak accident? Was there something more sinister at play? Something tied to that Taco Bell? I tried to forget it all, move on. But one day, out of curiosity, I drove by the Taco Bell thinking maybe seeing it in daylight would help me feel better. As I approached, I noticed something strange. There were no cars in the parking lot. The lights inside were off, but the sign was still lit. It felt like the place was waiting for something, or someone. I pulled into the lot, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. As I got out of the car, I heard a faint sound, knocking, almost as if someone was inside the building desperately trying to get out. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I turned around, ready to leave, but then something caught my eye. A figure standing in the window looking directly at me. But the face? It wasn't human. It was a blur of shadows and shapes, a face that never quite formed. Without thinking, I ran back to my car, my heart racing, my thoughts scattered. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the Taco Bell wasn't just a fast food joint. It was something much darker, something I had barely escaped. And the worst part? I knew I wasn't the only one who had experienced it. I knew there were others trapped in that place just waiting for their time to disappear. I drove away from that Taco Bell, heart pounding, thoughts racing. The world around me seemed a little less real, like everything was tinted with something off. Something I couldn't describe. Something that lingered in the air long after I had left. For weeks, I tried to push it from my mind. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But I couldn't forget the image of that shadowy face in the window, or the sound of knocking that seemed to come from nowhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, waiting for the next person to step in. Then one night, I received a message. It was from Tom. Simple at first. "Are you okay? Been thinking about the Taco Bell a lot. I've been having those dreams again. Same place, same feeling." I typed out a response, my fingers trembling. But before I could hit send, another message popped up. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "It's not over. I stared at the words, my blood running cold. The message was brief, but the chill it sent through me was anything but. It was as though the sender knew exactly what had happened, like they were watching, waiting, just as I had feared. I tried calling Tom, but he didn't pick up. I sent him a few more messages. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed again. A notification from an app I hadn't checked in ages. The Taco Bell social media page. A new post. The caption read, "Some stories never end." I opened the post, and what I saw made my stomach drop. The picture was taken inside the Taco Bell. Too familiar. But it was empty. The lights were flickering, and in the corner of the frame, I could make out something. A figure standing in the shadows, facing the camera. And it wasn't human. I backed away from my phone, heart racing, the room around me feeling smaller, colder. I thought about going back to that place, finding out once and for all what was happening. But something stopped me. The same feeling I'd had in the parking lot, the coldness in the air that day I left. It wasn't just the Taco Bell. It was something more. Something that followed you. And I wasn't sure I'd ever escape it. I didn't reply to Tom. I didn't respond to the message from the unknown number. Some things are better left alone. It was supposed to be a simple birthday hangout. Callum, Jenna, and I had just turned 16, and as a treat, we decided to go to a fast food place that wasn't just close but also a bit of a novelty in our small town. The newly opened Taco Express had been a bit of a buzz in the area, and none of us could resist the chance to try something different, especially after school. We walked into the brightly lit restaurant, the smell of seasoned beef and fried tortillas filling the air. We were loud, laughing about trivial things, trying to enjoy the freedom of the evening. We ordered our food, sitting down at one of the round tables by the window. It wasn't busy, just a few other patrons scattered around the space. But there was one man sitting by himself across from us. At first, he blended into the background. He was a scruffy, unkempt man, his hair long and tangled, his jacket too big for his frame. His clothes had holes, and his shoes looked worn out. He appeared to be in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. I assumed he was just another homeless guy, someone who had wandered in for a bite, and that was fine by me. We all had our things to focus on. But then, as we dug into our food, I noticed something strange. The man hadn't moved, not once. He just sat there, his eyes locked directly on us. No blinking, no fidgeting. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Callum," I whispered, nudging him with my elbow. He didn't look at me right away. He was busy with his taco, but after a few seconds he turned his head. "What?" "That guy, over there. He hasn't stopped staring." Callum shifted in his seat, casually glancing at the man. As soon as he did, the man's gaze dropped. He looked down at the table, suddenly aware he'd been caught. But something about the whole interaction felt off, like he'd been waiting for someone to notice. He wasn't embarrassed. It wasn't like he hadn't been caught in the act. It was like he had a plan, and it had been interrupted. "Maybe he's on something," Callum muttered, shrugging it off, but I wasn't so sure. It felt wrong, but I didn't want to make a bigger deal out of it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just some random stranger. We finished our food quickly, not speaking much after that. I tried to push the thoughts of the man out of my head, but it wasn't easy. His eyes kept flashing back to my mind. Something wasn't right. "I'll be right back. Need the bathroom," I said, trying to act normal. It was a weak excuse to get away, but it was the only one I had. I walked toward the bathrooms, feeling the chill of the restaurant air wash over me as I passed the booths and tables. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, and the quiet hum of a soda machine in the corner was the only sound. As I entered the ladies' room, I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease. I stepped into a cubicle and locked the door. For a few moments, I was alone in the quiet, but then I heard something that made my stomach tighten. A slow, deliberate breathing. It wasn't the kind of sound you'd expect from anyone just using the bathroom. It was heavy, uneven, like someone struggling to breathe. I froze, my heart starting to beat faster. I waited for a moment, trying to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe someone had just walked in and was having a rough time. But then I heard it. The unmistakable voice of a man, low and raspy. "I know you're in there." A chill ran down my spine, and I suddenly felt a panic rise in my chest. My brain screamed at me to stay calm, to do something, but my body was paralyzed. That voice, it was the same man from the table, the man who had been staring at us. He was here. He was in the bathroom. I slowly opened the cubicle door, just a crack. The man was standing there, right outside the stall. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide, fixed on the space where I had been. In his hand, he gripped something shiny, something metallic. My eyes went straight to it, and for a split second, I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. It was a knife, a long, sharp blade reflecting the harsh light above. I didn't even think. I slammed the door shut, unlatched it, and bolted out of the bathroom without looking back. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my feet barely touched the ground as I sprinted to the front counter, slamming my hand down on the polished surface. "There's a guy in the bathroom. He's got a knife," I gasped, my voice high with panic. The staff member, a young woman with a friendly smile just moments before, looked taken aback, but quickly grabbed the phone behind the counter. "Stay here. I'm calling the police," she said, her voice steady, but her eyes wide with concern. I stood there, trembling, trying to steady my breathing. How had I not noticed? How had no one else? Had they seen him go in? Were they just letting him walk around like that? Minutes later, sirens screamed in the distance, growing louder as they neared the restaurant. The door swung open and the officers came rushing in. I pointed to the bathroom, my heart racing again. The police moved fast, kicking open the bathroom door and securing the area. I couldn't hear much from where I stood, but the tension was thick in the air. After what felt like hours, one of the officers approached me, his face grim. He had a knife on him. "You did the right thing by getting out of there." I nodded, trying to swallow the bile rising in my throat. The man had been waiting for something, or someone. I shuddered to think what would have happened if I hadn't gone to the bathroom when I did. The minutes seemed to stretch endlessly as I stood there, my hands shaking. I could feel the cold sweat on my palms, the tightness in my chest. I wanted to sit down, to breathe, but I couldn't. I had to keep moving. I had to stay aware of what was happening, even if I didn't understand it. Callum and Jenna came running up to me a few minutes later, their faces pale with concern. Jenna grabbed my arm, her voice shaky. "What's going on? What happened? Are you okay?" I don't know. There was a man in the bathroom. He was waiting for me. I stammered, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "He had a knife," I added, swallowing hard. The memory of the cold, glinting steel was still fresh in my mind. Jenna's eyes widened in disbelief. "A knife? What the hell? Are you sure?" "Positive," I replied, looking over at the bathroom door again, still expecting the man to walk out at any second. The thought made my heart race even faster. I don't know what he was planning, but he wasn't going to let me leave. The sound of police radios and the chatter of officers talking to each other filled the air. The restaurant, once so familiar, now felt like a foreign place, empty and hollow. People had started to leave, murmuring to each other in confusion, but there were still a few who remained, watching the scene unfold with curiosity and fear. The officers were everywhere now, speaking with the employees, getting statements from other customers who had been in the restaurant at the time. It was clear this was no small matter. I felt numb as the police began asking me questions. They wanted to know everything, what the man had looked like, what he had said, how long I had been in the bathroom. It felt like a blur, like I was speaking about someone else's experience. I had trouble focusing, my mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened. How had it escalated so quickly? What had he wanted? The questions kept spinning around, and I couldn't seem to get a grip on them. "Do you have any idea why he picked you?" one of the officers asked, his brow furrowed. I shook my head, No, I didn't have a clue. I wasn't anyone special, just a kid out with her friends. I wasn't a target, at least I didn't think so. We're going to need to take a statement from your friends, too, the officer continued. Is there anything else you can remember? Anything unusual about the man before all of this happened? I thought back to earlier when I had first noticed him, when his eyes had fixed on us. It was such a small thing, but it had stuck with me. He was staring at us while we ate, I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue. I thought he was just a homeless guy at first, but then he didn't blink, he didn't move, he just watched. Did anyone else notice? The officer asked, turning to Jenna and Callum. Jenna nodded, her expression tight. Yeah, I saw it too. It was creepy, but we thought maybe he was on something. He didn't really look like he belonged here. Callum added, I didn't think much of it either. I figured he was just weird. The officer made a note on his pad, his face darkening. We're going to need to review the security footage. If this guy's a regular, we'll be able to find something, but for now, we'll make sure he's gone. You're safe. I nodded, but even as I said the words, I wasn't sure if I believed them. I had seen him. I had felt the weight of his eyes on me, the way he just stood there, so calm, like he was waiting for the right moment. It wasn't something I could forget. No matter how many times the police reassured me, no matter how many times they said I was safe, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. As the night wore on, the police eventually left, their investigation now in full swing. The man, it seemed, had disappeared before they could catch him. There were no reports of anyone matching his description in the area. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Callum, Jenna, and I stood outside the restaurant, huddled together in the chilly night air. I didn't want to leave, didn't want to go home and try to sleep, but there didn't seem to be much else to do. I don't know what to think about all this, Callum said, his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. It doesn't make sense, Jenna added. How could he just disappear like that? We didn't even hear him leave. I'm not sure, I murmured, my voice quiet. But I'm never coming back here. Ever again. The idea of sitting in that same spot, at that same table, with that same man staring at me across the room made my stomach churn. I didn't think I could ever feel safe there again. We said our goodbyes, each of us heading in different directions, but I could feel the weight of the night hanging over me. I didn't know if the man had been watching me for days, if he had some kind of plan, or if he had just decided on a whim to pick me. All I knew was that something had shifted in me that night. Something inside me had cracked open and I couldn't just forget it. The days that followed were a blur. I went to school like normal, tried to pretend everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Everywhere I went, I found myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see that same cold stare. I'd seen it in my dreams, even when my eyes were closed. It was as though his gaze had burned itself into my memory, a permanent mark that wouldn't fade. I tried to talk about it, tried to tell people what had happened, but no one really seemed to understand. I told my parents, and they were concerned, of course, but they weren't there. They hadn't seen the man, hadn't felt the weight of his eyes on them. It was like it wasn't real to them. It wasn't real to anyone who hadn't been in the bathroom that night. No one could truly grasp what I had felt, what I had experienced. The police had called a few times for more details, but they never found anything. No one could trace the man. There was no record of him in the town, no missing person report that matched his description. It was like he had never existed. Days turned into weeks, but the unease didn't fade. The events at the Taco Bell were constantly on my mind. It was impossible to shake the image of the man's cold, unblinking stare. I found myself becoming more paranoid, checking my surroundings even in the most mundane places. I'd lock eyes with strangers, only to quickly look away, afraid of seeing that same unearthly gaze again. The thought that this man could be anywhere, that he could be watching me, was overwhelming. I didn't feel safe anywhere, not at school, not at home. Not even when I was with my friends. They tried to reassure me, but it didn't help. They didn't understand. They couldn't. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was an email from the police department. I hadn't expected to hear from them again. They had all but forgotten about the case, or so it seemed. The subject line read, "Further investigation, Taco Bell incident." I hesitated before opening it. It could just be an update, something small that would only drag up the feelings I was trying to bury. But something pushed me to click it. The email was short, to the point. "We've had a breakthrough in your case. Please contact us as soon as possible for further details." I felt a chill run down my spine. The last thing I expected was for them to actually find something. The man had disappeared without a trace. How could they have made any progress? I grabbed my phone and dialed the number from the email, my heart racing in my chest. The call rang 3 times before someone answered. "Detective Harris, how can I help you?" The voice on the other end said, steady but professional. Hi. I'm Sarah Evans. I received an email about an update on the Taco Bell incident. I paused, trying to steady my nerves. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you again." "Understandable," Harris replied. "But we've been going through some older cases, and there's a connection we think you should know about." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "A connection? What do you mean?" "There have been a few other incidents similar to yours, reported in nearby towns. Not exactly the same, but the details, they match." There was a brief pause, and I could hear the sound of papers rustling in the background. "We believe this man might have been responsible for all of them." "What kind of incidents?" My voice was shaky now. "Mostly people being followed, watched, isolated incidents. But the descriptions of the man you gave us match. He's always around, lurking at the edges. A tall figure with unkempt hair, wearing ragged clothes. But there's more." I could hear the tension in his voice. It made my skin crawl. "More?" I asked, my throat dry. The more we looked into it, the more we realized this man isn't just a random stranger. He's known for lurking near fast food restaurants, targeting people in their most vulnerable moments. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt sick. Could he have been following me even before that day? "Is he still out there?" I asked, barely able to whisper the words. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "We don't know," Harris said slowly. "We haven't been able to find any trace of him after your report. He's good at disappearing, but we're working on it." I sat there for a moment, processing the information. I couldn't decide whether to feel relief or fear. Was this really over, or was this just the beginning? The weeks passed, and life began to return to a semblance of normalcy, though a part of me always stayed on edge. I no longer sat in the back of the class staring at the door, wondering when the man would walk through it. I didn't check behind me every time I walked home from school, but the unease lingered, as if my mind was always just a few steps ahead of my body, reminding me that the man could still be out there somewhere. Then, one day, I received a letter. It came in a plain envelope with no return address. Inside, there was just a single, typed sentence: "You should have stayed away." I felt a shiver creep up my spine as I read the words. They were chilling in their simplicity. My heart dropped as I stared at the letter, unable to look away. It was him. He had found me again. In that moment, I knew that this wasn't over. No matter how many years had passed, no matter how far I ran, the man would always be lurking, watching, waiting. The fear that had once seemed like it would fade had settled deep within me, a permanent part of who I had become. And I realized as I stood there staring at the letter in my hand that I would never be able to escape him.